Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Wellness Go Live, episode number 3, brought to you by the Minority Health Coalition of the United Way of Anderson County. I'm Juana Slade, and we're glad you decided to spend some time with us on this cool, not so early fall afternoon. It's the time of year when we start to think about family and friends and good home cooking, binging on Hallmark and Lifetime movies with a lot of fake snow. And if you're lucky, perhaps even a little bit of real snow. But for some people, this isn't such a celebratory season. For people with seasonal affective disorder or SAD, the shorter days and less daylight are often trigger a chemical change in the brain, leading to symptoms of depression. So our guests are experts on social and emotional disorders. They're going to talk with us about SAD and what the symptoms are, who's most often affected, and what we can do to disrupt the symptoms and patterns. So let's get started. Now, I've been a United Way volunteer for more than 30 years. The United Way of Anderson County goes beyond temporary fixes to create lasting change. The United Way staff and volunteers are tackling some of the biggest, most complex challenges facing our community. Now, one of those issues is health inequities. Within minority communities, more commonly referred to as health disparities. Health disparities are actual, measurable, and real issues. Across the country, data show a wide gap in life expectancy rates of serious illnesses like diabetes, high blood pressure, and certain cancers in Black and Brown communities. Wellness Go Live is a virtual conversation with experts who are willing to take a few moments to have real conversations, real talk about various topics. They perhaps might provide us with a variety of few practical tips about things that we can do to live a healthier life. According to the National Council for Mental Health Wellness, one of the remaining taboos in many communities of color is a stigma around mental illness, whether it's depression or anxiety, or in worst case scenarios, suicide. There is a long-standing belief in these communities, our communities, that says we don't need to talk about that. These topics and issues are taboo, and their impact is a problem of the other. Though communities of color, because of socioeconomic challenges, may be at a higher risk for poor mental health, this stigma contributes to a reluctance to recognize the need for the help of a physician or a therapist. For many in the African American community, our story is one of perseverance and resilience. After all, we survived slavery. Surely we can survive sadness or anxiety. In this mindset, anything less could be considered spiritual or moral weakness. The problem in part is that we often fail to recognize that mental illness is as much more than feeling melancholy or anxious. It's not a sign of weakness, and it does not discriminate based on skin color. We fail to recognize mental illness is just that, an illness, just as we would cancer, diabetes, or high blood pressure. Now, finally, one more statistic. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, approximately 1 in 5 adults in the U.S. experiences mental illness in a year. This is irrespective of race, creed, or color. In addition, according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office of Minority Health, adult Black and African Americans are 20% more likely to report serious psychological distress than adult whites. Despite that number, African Americans are less likely than whites to seek out treatment and more likely to end up prematurely canceling or canceling treatment. On the one hand, this is due in part to long-held beliefs related to stigma, openness, and help seeking, which can make African Americans and other people of color hesitant to reach out. Joining us today are two experts who are going to take a few minutes to help us unpack the uncomfortable topic of depression, especially seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. Now, let's meet our experts. First, we have Anisha Blanding. Anisha is the founder and owner of Life Transitions. She is a licensed professional counselor practicing in both South Carolina and North Carolina. A certified yoga instructor, Anisha has a vision and passion for assisting others to live happy, healthy, emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual lifestyles. She provides outpatient counseling and coaching services. Also, we have with us Tracy Richardson. Tracy is the Director of Transition Programs for the South Carolina Department of Mental Health and has been with SCDMH for more than 27 years. Tracy was the first mental health counselor professionally trained in South Carolina as a crisis counseling program trainer certified by FEMA. She has extensive experience with trauma, focused therapy, de-escalation techniques, crisis management, suicide awareness, and cultural awareness. She has conducted crisis counseling programs across the nation and coordinated a psychological first aid response for local community school shootings. A graduate of Webster University, Tracy is an adjunct professor at Anderson University. Now, in her spare time, Ms. Richardson enjoys engaging in community service with Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Welcome, Anisha and Tracy. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. Now, ladies, let's get started. Tracy, we're going to start with you. Let's talk about the basics. What is seasonal affective disorder?
So, first of all, I want to thank the Minority Health Coalition for the opportunity to talk about seasonal affective disorder and depression in general, because as you stated, it is something that is tabooed and really not talked about a lot in the African American world. So it's great to be able to share some information with the community. So seasonal affective disorder, known as SAD or SAD, it's also known as seasonal depression or winter depression. In the Diagnostic Manual of Mental Disorders, this particular statistical manual is what doctors utilize in order to diagnose individuals. But this particular disorder is a type of depression, and it is under the major depression disorder category. And so right now it's major depression disorder with seasonal pattern. So the seasonal affective disorder is a type of depression that's triggered by changes in the season. And so right now we have a change in the season. We have just had a recent change in time. And so that can certainly play a part in seasonal depression. It usually begins in late fall and ends about the same time every year. Now I can talk about a little bit about some of the symptoms of the seasonal affective disorder, and some of those are feelings of sadness or depression. Now, mind you, let me give the caveat that this seasonal or this sadness and depression has to last for a specific amount of time. It also has to affect someone's daily functioning. And so if it's affecting your daily functioning, whether on the job or at home, then it can be diagnosed from that perspective. And so
is that typically how it's diagnosed?
Yes, it's typically diagnosed by, you have to experience the symptoms for a certain amount of time, at least 2 weeks constant, and it also has to affect your daily functioning. And so those are some of the early signs that you may see when it's not going away, when
Mm-hmm.
it's just
Mm-hmm.
and it's depression, that sadness for most of the day. Some of the other symptoms that occur are loss of interest in activities. You may have enjoyed, going out listening to jazz music. Now you don't enjoy going out listening to jazz music. You may have some isolation where you, in the past, may interact with others, and now you tend to isolate and not interact around others. Some of the other common symptoms that someone may experience is changes in their appetite. And this changes in appetite could be where you're not eating at all or you're eating too much. Also, changing in sleep pattern. Now, matter of fact, one of the most one of the easier ways for us as professionals to tell when someone's having problems is when we ask questions around sleep, because your
Mm-hmm.
sleep pattern is one of the first things that begin to change, whether you're not getting any sleep at all or you're sleeping all day. So, a change in those sleep patterns. Again, loss of energy, having fatigue, and then you could have some weight gain or some significant weight loss. So some of those are some of the symptoms of the seasonal affective disorder, which again mimic major depression.
So tell me, who is affected by SAD?
Now, statistically, who is being affected by SAD? Women are 4 times more often diagnosed. It occurs 4 times more often in women than men.
Mm-hmm.
And usually the age of the onset is between the ages of 18 to 30 years old. Also, research has shown that those living farther from the equator in northern
Wow.
latitudes are also susceptible. So, places like Canada, Alaska, Washington, Minnesota, New York, Vermont, Maine, some of those are the states that may experience, where individuals may experience some sadness.
Wow. Wow. Is there a cause? Do you know? Can you help us with where this comes from? Is there something that we can do about that?
Well, of course, when talking about mental health, it's not always absolute, but some of the correlations that we've seen that related to SAD is that we have a less light, shorter days are thought to be linked to a
Mm-hmm.
chemical change in the brain, and may be a part of the seasonal affective disorder. Also, it's thought that shorter days and less daylight may trigger those increased symptoms of depression, which lead to it, those increased symptoms. You have melatonin, a sleep related hormone, also has been linked to SAD, as well as your body's naturally makes more melatonin when it's dark. So
Mm-hmm.
that correlates as well. I do want to back up a minute, if I could, Juanita, and just talk about a minute about the how it affects African Americans, because research has shown that African Americans are especially vulnerable to the seasonal affective disorder because of reduced sunlight can impact our serotonin levels, the brain chemical that affects mood. And I don't know about anybody else, but I know that I don't like to go out into the sunlight. I don't like to be hot. And so I have to think about ways to get that sunlight, because sunlight is important. Something else that affects us is that Black people are highly likely to be vitamin D deficient. And so, again, vitamin D deficiency is related to what? That exposure to
The sun.
sunlight. And if
Mm-hmm.
you don't like going out into sunlight, then you have to look at, and I know this will probably be something that my colleague talks about, then you have to look at what are some things that you're going to do to replenish that vitamin D, and what are some things you're going to do to expose yourself more to sunlight. And so, again, just to add on, that vitamin D deficiency also affects your mood, your
Mm-hmm.
energy, and the ability to concentrate and focus, which are some of the things that I talked about as the symptoms of the disorder.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you say that. A friend of mine, she was a master's prepared educator, and she ended up having to walk away from the profession because when the seasons changed, she
Mhm.
was incapable of doing what she needed to do to get herself up and going and go to school and work with her students. And so she, as I said, unfortunately, she was a very good teacher, but she had to walk away.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you, Tracy. I think you've helped us with some of the basics and some of the definitions. Now let's hear a little bit about SAD from Anisha's perspective. I want to talk about perhaps what some of our options might be. I know that you are a therapist, and I think you and I had a conversation about yoga. So, but what have you seen in your practice as it relates to depression and the alignment of mental attitude and wellness? You're muted.
Here I go.
Yeah, there you are.
First and foremost, I would like to say thank you for inviting me onto this amazing platform to be with you, amazing women, talking about SAD and how we can overcome this in our community. I typically see a lot of this during the changes in the season, and also too typically when you see this in women, like Miss Richardson mentioned, you'll see it a lot with women who come in with SAD and just dealing with the changes in the seasons and less exposure to the sun and not really knowing what these mood changes are about and what they can do about them. And so, one thing that I always recommend to my patients is to have a self-care plan. And self-care plan is being proactive, not waiting until if you see this reoccurring over time, it's kind of out noticing like this is problematic. And I know during the summertime, this is kind of me needing to have a plan, a treatment plan, or being proactive to prepare myself for the colder or the winter weather. And so having a self-care routine or a plan is always highly recommended from me to my
Mhm.
patients. And it's always okay, what can you do to take care of yourself? What does that look like? What are your habits now? What do we need to change? Like, are we exercising? Are we moving around? Do we have any relaxation techniques that you can use? Are we talking to a therapist? We're talking to people that I support people about our challenges and our struggles and how can they help us in these moments. Being mindful of our diet, being mindful of going out into the sun, and if you can't, also to being mindful of warning signs and triggers that says like, hey, this might be some depression creeping in. What are my warning signs and what are the triggers and how can I navigate through that?
Mhm. Well, it's very interesting that you say that. Now that we're actually talking about the discussion, I recognize that I do start to feel a little more uncomfortable in the winter time, and I think it's because I'm hardwired. Once the sun starts to go down, then
Yeah,
it's time to go to bed, and then I realize, well, wait a minute, it's
yeah,
still just 6:30. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
so I've started trying to change some of my habits, and I think that as you and I talked the other day, being mindful is critical. What are some of those things that perhaps we can control, and we can do differently?
Absolutely. Yeah. And depression, knowing that depression is not something that you just snap out of. A lot of times when we're
Hmm.
not feeling okay, we beat ourselves up for not feeling okay. But knowing that it's okay not to be okay. So being gentle with yourself in those times too, on top of having that plan, being gentle with yourself and know that you will feel better eventually. But having that plan in place will help you to navigate through the emotions. People sometimes, because we don't have a plan, we get lost. It was like I'm feeling down, but then it becomes this quicksand that we fall deeper and deeper and deeper into because we don't know what's going on or what's wrong with me. And so you allow yourself to kind of sink into it. And that's why for
Hmm.
me, having that proactive plan, I need to get up. I need to do something. If I'm isolating myself, I need to be aware. This is a warning sign. This is kind of like that red flashing light, like, all right, something's wrong. Let's do something different because this is what I'm doing is
Hmm.
not working. And that's very,
Hmm.
very important.
I noticed that when Tracy was going through the information about some of the statistics and locations and locale and all those kinds of things, and then she made the point that women are disproportionately impacted by SAD. Um, I certainly agree because I've seen that, and I've certainly heard individuals in the mental health profession talk about similar stats. But what about men and sometimes their reluctance to treatment. I know that there are men who are listening and will probably come to the conclusion or assumption that three women talking about seasonal disorder, stats said women were affected. Can you talk a little bit about men in depression in general and in particular, if appropriate, as it relates to SAD?
Yeah, even though we see women, it affects women more than men. I believe that men also too experience seasonal depression as well as what and depression overall. I feel that men, they don't seek treatment like women seek treatment, and so they
Mm-hmm.
more so deal with it themselves or don't seek anything at all because they're like, there's a stigma, especially I feel like in the Black community with Black men and therapy, and it's a stigma of, I'm not crazy, why do I need to go to therapy? And so I
Mm-hmm.
feel like there's a lack of education when it comes to that, to know that mental health is real, and it's okay, again, not to feel okay. And what I've seen is that I feel like it probably affects men more than just as much as it affects women, but you don't really see a lot of men catering to that because,
That's right.
there's that, again, that stigma of men feeling like I don't have a problem. I just push through and fight through all my issues. But I do feel that it's very important, just kind of from my own experience working in this field. I don't see a lot of men who come seeking services for issues that they're having, especially depression. And the men that come into my office and finally come to a space of realizing that there is an issue, it's because their life is totally off track and they feel like they don't have any other way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
they end up in therapy.
Yeah.
But again, that proactive plan, having a plan and knowing that, hey, first it's okay for you not to be okay. And then it's okay to talk to someone just to have an outlet. Because I think there's
Mm-hmm.
this perception too of therapy is it's intended to fix you, and it's not. That's not how therapy works. It gives you the skills to help you work through and navigate things to yourself until you're able to get to a more balanced place where you feel like you can function in your day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm. Well, I got to tell you, you inspired me to get back to the mindfulness of yoga.
Yeah.
I think I shared this with you, but I'll share it with others. True story. I take a low dose for high blood pressure, and soon after my doctor prescribed it to me, I purely by accident, um, I started taking yoga again, my yoga practice, and um, twice a week for about 6 or 7 months, and then had to go back to see my doctor. And I went back to see her, and she had this strange, kind of perplexed look on her face, and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "What do you mean, what am I doing?" I said, "Nothing." She said, "What are you doing different?" And I said, "Nothing." She said, "If you changed your diet?" I said, "No." She said, "Are you exercising?" I said, "No." She said, "What are you doing? Tell me what you're doing." I said, "Everything's the same." She said, "But there's something different. Your numbers are down. You've lost 10 pounds and you're no longer interested in sleeping medication." And I said, "I started taking yoga. I began a yoga practice a few months ago." And she pointed at me and she said, "That's it."
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk about the mindfulness a little bit? What
Absolutely.
exactly is that? What
So
does it mean?
mindfulness practices are just you being intentional about being in the moment. So a lot of times, because the way our brains are wired, we're constantly thinking of things, whether it be present things, things tomorrow, things yesterday, things happened years ago. Our brains are kind of wired to always be moving. And what we call in yoga, we call it like this chatter, constant chatter in our brain every day, all day. And so it's hard sometimes to just slow down and just allow yourself to be present in the moment and give yourself the space and permission to be in the present moment. And so with mindfulness, it's a way of telling you that, hey, slow down, be here, be now. Yesterday doesn't matter because it's gone. Tomorrow, we cannot predict what is going to happen. So allow yourself to be here and be now and see if you can let go of all the things that you can't control. And so
Mhm.
through my yoga practice, what I've learned, and what, again, another thing that I teach my students who come to me for yoga, and also too for therapy, is that we are only in control of what we're in control of. And a lot of times, a lot of our stress comes from trying to control things that are out of our control. And so that solitude, or that place of being with yourself, kind of allows you just to be mindful of, hey, I'm here with myself right now, and that's all I can do, and that's okay. And there's a lot of different
Sounds
mindfulness techniques that you can use too. There's grounding techniques that comes into mindfulness, like positive self-talk is another mindfulness technique. And so it's a lot of different mindfulness techniques that you can use that I myself, use for my own self-care routine.
awesome. Well, we are near the time together. Let's get Tracy back on, and what I'd like for the two of you to do, I'd like for you to give us the two things that you want us to take away from this conversation, and in your order of preference, maybe the one you think that's most important. Save that one for last. But Tracy, since you got us going, tell us, what are the two things that you want us to take away from today's conversation?
The two things that I would want you all to take away from this today is that it's important to ask for help, and it's okay to ask for help. There are doctors, there are mental health centers, there are licensed professionals in the community that are willing to help. And one of the things that I would encourage is for anyone who has been successful with managing depression or managing seasonal affective disorder to talk about it, to tell your story. I've found that when we tell our story, then it allows for others to know that they're not alone in this, and that they're not the only ones experiencing symptoms of depression. So reach out and ask for help. And secondly, I think it's important for the community to take the information, to look at how they can personally apply it to their lives, and how they can change their mindset to knowing that there are people out there willing to help, and to look at how the looking at depression is not, knowing it's not a negative. You have some symptoms of an illness, and that there are resources out there that's willing to help you with that, with those symptoms. Every one of us have positive skills in us. Everyone has perseverance and resiliency. And so relying on that, relying on your strengths, and seeking out, asking for help.
Awesome. Anisha?
So one thing that I would like for everyone to take from this conversation, like I mentioned before, snapping out of depression is not realistic. So don't feel like you have to snap out of depression. Be gentle with yourself as you navigate through depression, and know that eventually that you will feel better in time. So don't beat yourself up for not feeling well, because it's okay not to be okay. Secondly, I would say definitely tune into your support people. Have someone there to talk to in need. Like, if you have anything that you see these warning signs, something that's going on with you, don't be afraid to say that I'm not okay. And don't be afraid to reach out to someone. Don't be afraid to talk to your doctors about antidepressants, because sometimes antidepressants can help in addition to therapy. That can help with the chemical imbalance. So don't be afraid to talk to your doctors about, hey, what are some options? What are some possible medications, if anything? Don't feel ashamed to seek therapy. If you need therapy, there's many providers that you can reach out for. So I always know that there's help here. Be open to help and be willing to reach out for help if needed.
Well, wow, I feel supported myself. I don't know about the others who are going to listen in, how they felt, but what I heard the two of you say: ask for help, know you're not alone, tell your story, apply it to your own life, acknowledge that there are resources. Snapping out of it is not realistic. Be gentle and kind with yourself. Don't be afraid to say that you're not okay. And most importantly, for all of us, for our community, don't be embarrassed to seek help.
Absolutely.
If anyone is in crisis, 24/7, 988. And I'm sure that either of our friends on the call today will be more than happy to help us. We know how to get in touch with Anisha. We know how to get in touch with Tracy. But make sure that you understand that it is important that you get in touch with someone. Don't suffer in silence. A wonderful, wonderful opportunity. We are so incredibly excited and thankful that you ladies agreed to be a part of this conversation. We're already making plans for next month. I think one of you actually touched on diet. Next month, we're going to we'll host a conversation on a healthier twist on some traditional holiday recipes. So we'll see how that happens.
That's going to be a good one.
Yeah, we hope it will be. Let me just say thank you to both of you for saying yes. Thank you for lending your expertise. Be sure to touch in with the Minority Health Coalition if there's anything that we can do. If someone reaches out to us, we'll send them your way. And those of you, thank you for spending your time with Wellness Go Live. Anisha, Tracy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank
Such
you.
an honor.